Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Espresso, your daily shot of Chinese words with Catherine Xiang. I'm really pleased to have Dr. Duo Luan with us today. And in this 名师讲坛 Ask the Expert series, where we invite experts in Chinese language education to share their insights and their research, and particularly very important to give advice to our learners. So, hi, Dr. Luan. Would you like to say hi?
Hi, hello everyone. It's really nice to see you through Catherine's channel. And my name is Luan Duo. At the moment, I'm working at University of Edinburgh. I'm a Chinese language director at Asian Studies.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I actually worked with Ram at a range of different conferences, and she's been really interested in a lot of innovation in Chinese language education. So please first allow me to introduce her formally. Dr. Duo Luan is Chinese Language Program Director at the University of Edinburgh and also Confucius Institute for Scotland. She has taught Chinese language in UK higher education nearly 2 decades and has strong sector recognition for her innovative approach to teaching Chinese as a foreign language pedagogy. She has presented, as I mentioned, at a range of different conferences across UK, Europe, giving trainings to many organizations with regards to teaching Chinese, and also published her papers in the area of language teaching and learning strategy. She is also a senior examiner of University of Cambridge International Examinations and act as external examiner at a range of British higher education institutes. So again, really nice to have you. And I know you are, really has great ideas in designing, in innovation of pedagogy. So I think this is what we are expecting and hope to hear more from you.
Hello, friends. And at first, many thanks for Catherine Xiang inviting me to this channel. Catherine Xiang asked what sorts of topic I would like to talk. I said, okay, maybe something about innovative pedagogy for designing, developing, and delivering Chinese language courses. Sounds like a huge title. But what I want to do today is just would like to use this opportunity to share my teaching and research experience with you. There's a very famous Chinese idiom called 抛砖引玉, which means I hope my limited experience could inspire you to achieving a greater goal. So how should I start? I will start my talk with 3 very famous questions, which are who I am, and where do I come from, and where I'm going. So that's very famous 3 philosophical questions. But the first question is who I am. If allow me to give a definition to myself, first I will address myself from a career aspect, a teacher. Of course, I'm also a wife and a mom to 2 kids. However, I identify and call myself as a teacher, a frontline teacher, and a Chinese language teacher. I have been a Chinese language teacher like Catherine Xiang for nearly 2 decades. I started my career as a part-time language teacher and taught Mandarin at the University of Wales to a newly established subject to Chinese study nearly 20 years ago. It was a very small team at that time, so I was lucky to directly involve to design and develop Chinese language program over there. That probably explains why my interest lays in designing, developing, and delivering Chinese language course. My undergraduate degree was complete in China, which was Chinese language and literature education. You might say teaching Chinese students Chinese must be very different from teaching Chinese to international students. Well, yes or no. I would like to say whoever you teach, you need to make sure you have solid knowledge of Chinese language and its related linguistic understandings. And as in my undergraduate university, we learn to take a traditional approach to teach Chinese and literature. However, the situation was different in the UK. When I started my language teaching, many Mandarin language teacher at that time took a grammar translation method and use English terminology to interpret the Chinese language to the students. Of course, nowadays, many teaching and research have been done to the field of TCFL. But at that time, as a teacher, I start to wonder what is the practical or sustainable way or approach to teach Chinese. That is how I start my research journey along with my teaching. When we talk about approach, which means to a way we look at teaching and learning, teaching Chinese as an international language to some extent is similar to teach other modern languages. Here, what I meant the same is the theoretical will of what a language is and how it can be learned and teach. That's what we call language teaching approach. Approach leads to methods, the way of teaching something using activities or technologies to help learners learn. So here, I would like to share a little PowerPoint here. There you are. Here you could see in this slide, I list a few common techniques in teaching modern language. So we mentioned the grammar translation method just now. It also has such as silent way. And teacher use a mixture of silence gestures to focus students' attention, to encourage them to correct their own mistake, or such as communicative language teaching, and sometimes someone may call it as a communicative language learning. It emphasizes a sense of community in the language group, encourage interactions. So students themselves decided the content of reason, the lesson by means of meaningful conversation in which they discussed the real message, and so on. Because of time, I won't go through every approach in this talk. All right, so, okay, to a new teacher, often a question was asked to me by quite a number of new teachers is which approach is better or best. So I will answer that there's no one method is superior to another, or there's ever will be a perfect method. Like to the side, if it would be assumed that learners were simple learners, the teacher were simple teachers, and that one classroom was essentially the same as the other, there would probably be little need for other than a technology approach to language teaching. And we all know the truth is not that simple. We could be a simple teacher, but your learners or students are not simple learners and students. So come back to the start of my talk. I'm a teacher. The research I have done is to find appropriate and suitable approaches or methods in order to teach Chinese language to my not simple students. And for example, by doing research, I contribute a chapter of exploring intercultural communication through the act of translation and subtitling in Catherine Xiang's book. Case on
contribution.
Yes, the case on audio-visual method in language education. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And with Dr. Sun, we co-published a paper of the integration of the CEFR in designing Chinese teaching materials for local resources. So if you allow me give a metaphor here, to me, I feel I like shopper. I go to shop to find the products which suit to my life purpose, and thanks to many researchers, they have done fantastic job in different areas. And to me, I'm doing the research to their research or test the research. On the basis of their research, I develop my own interest and intends to support or test the initial research. Okay, so it's very nice to share my past teaching experience with you and tell you how I started my career and research. Now I'm working at Asian Studies at the University of Edinburgh as a Chinese language program director. So as a program director, the role and the will is different for being a language teacher. So Catherine Xiang may know that. So you not only look at your teaching content as an individual course, so you should be able to overview the entire program to make sure it's a sustainable development. And there is cohesive and coherent within courses and between courses. So how to create a stable, continuous, sustainable learning environment for modern language teaching and learning? This is million-dollar questions, right? So I wish I can find that answer as well. As we could see, there is a decline tendency in modern language learning nowadays, not only in higher education, but down to the school level, especially in the UK. We hope it can change in future. However, we need to see a broad picture, particularly like me and Xiang, we're working at university levels. So we need a university infrastructure that level that can produce something, support our language learner. So no matter how excellent our modern language program is and how good your student learning experience, the key fact which brings to the fundamental change is how our university operates. Here I list down a generic infrastructure of higher education in UK. Yeah, you can see here. As you could see, a university runs its structure as a top up and down pyramid. Well, under the umbrella of university, then belong to certain college and school and department. At the end, it comes to our subject area. So a successful program depends on a good university infrastructure and how they operate. But sometimes this is not in our control, I have to say that. So using my university as example, in every academic year, we are offering our Chinese language courses to around 200 students across university-wide. So how to design and develop or deliver Chinese language course to different diversity of students. We have been taking many innovative teaching approaches in past year, from traditional classroom teaching turned to like a game-driven learning, communicative learning, and create language course for cross-cultural awareness. So the course is based on understanding the nature of the students and their learning desire. So listen to your students' voice, offering course from language learning to develop students' Chinese literacy and for the professional career. So gradually, we start moving some of our teaching online, introduce like online techniques to classroom, and in some classes, teacher adapt a blended teaching method, like a flipped classroom. So those developments in past year help us switching our teaching online fairly smoothly and swiftly during the pandemic from last year. So we are entering a new decade, a new era. So people are talking about going back to the normal after pandemic. So however, I believe the pandemic has greatly changed the way we're teaching. And most importantly, the idea, the principle, and the philosophy of teaching. So people start talking that we will be back to the new normal after pandemic. Meanwhile, my own research expands to teaching in online or blended environments. So different from remote teaching, how could we combine our traditional teaching with online teaching together? I believe more and more educators and researchers will join the crew on how to teach Chinese online or how to teach language in blended or hybrid environment in future. In order to achieve an online language teaching, we need to acquire a broad base of knowledge across 3 domains. So what I'm doing is I'm going to share you a diagram from a colleague from University of Minnesota to demonstrate the 3 domains. The 3 domains are knowing how to teach language, which is language pedagogy. Knowing how to teach online is online pedagogy, and knowing how to use educational technology to deliver online teaching pedagogy for educational technology. So the intersection of these three domains are the key stepstone for online language teachers. The focus will lay to pedagogy and technology for teaching language online. Properly, this answer to my third question at the beginning, namely where I'm going. So probably I'm start going to that direction now. So except for the role of teacher, I'm doing my research along with my teaching, and also a program director. I'm also a trainer. I have run many CPDs and special trainings, including many online training during the pandemic. I'm so happy to see many Chinese language teachers are taking interest in innovative pedagogy and techniques in TCFL now. So at last, I would like to stress the question of who am I? So to be honest, I'm a teacher at the end of the day. After all, I'm still learning from colleagues, researchers, teachers who are teaching Chinese or other modern languages. So the journey won't be stopped in researching and applying the innovative and practical pedagogy to teach Chinese language as an international language. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, a lot of thoughts and also a lot of, different dimensions that teachers, first of all, need to take into consideration when they designing and delivering the courses. So thank you very much for that. I have a couple of questions to follow up, and also maybe some of my question will be also linked to what you said, but also to learners, because a lot of friends at the Espresso, they're Chinese learners, so they might also want to hear more from you in terms of your advice. So my question is, at the beginning, when you show, different methods, I think that's not only useful for teachers to remind you have so many different tools, right? It's also useful for learners to look at, oh, actually, there are so many different ways I can learn. So my question would be, how can learners discover their own learning style and to understand what approach or what method would be beneficial to them? How can they understand and realize, that method actually works for me?
I think that's the, back again, my first question, who am I? Okay, so what type of the learners I am? So often we will come to meet students, I will ask, well, were you good at it? And the student were talking, then you immediately can tell some students visual learners. So some students good at listening, and some students, what we call kinesthetic learners, which is they're very good at reading. So a research has been done in the past that said nowadays nearly 65% of students is visual learners. So when you understand, maybe doesn't really apply to everybody. So probably someone prefer just look at, do some reading to get knowledge. But some students, once they identify themselves, what type of the learning style they have, and maybe they will find the best strategy. For example, I can see many teachers combine the character with picture together. That is the best way for the visual learners. So they can see through the picture, they can see the character through the picture and they feel like a man. Oh yes, look like a man. And the mai, sort of look like a horse, but not apply to every students in that way. The other students is very good at listening. So for example, we do, like our program, we do offer students go to China to have the experience to talking to Chinese, to listen when they're talking. So student will find our beneficial from that. So that's first question I will ask students, what type of style you have and you're comfortable with. If you're good at drawing, my question often says, are you good at drawing? Okay, and then they say, yes, I kind of like a drawing, maybe you're visual learners. And then would you like to see some pictures, help you remember those characters? So again, who are we? And it's designed the way we are learning.
I see. Yeah, no, that's really good. So it's also encourage learners to ask themselves, right?
Yes.
A bit of reflection, what works for them, and then decide what's the best approach. Very good. And the other thing, so you talked about, your publication about the subtitling and translation. people can read your article. I'm going to put a link in the description. But what kind of application or implication through that research you think you can offer to learners? So why do you do that research, and what's the application for learning Chinese?
We come to that paper. The time I start writing that paper is, of course, that course is offered to advanced students. They already had a good amount of knowledge of Chinese. But in the past, we can see the students since start losing the interest. We all can understand the first time they start learning Chinese, they're full of passion, and then there's the hobby interest they want to learn. But gradually, and when they start learning more, and then they find why I'm learning Chinese, and what do I use this Chinese for, and then what can I gain out of this Chinese language learning? So in the third year, the final year, so at that time I offer translation in subtitling, and one way is show students like the professional career. What can you do through language? You have other opportunity. You can be a translator, or you can be a subtitler, which can do the translation. And then also through translating the some like video, some like film, they will understand this culture. They will really notice what's the culture different. And then that's why I'm doing the research and to try to see how the students can get out from the project they have done. And the same again in my in current university in the fourth year where I'm teaching translation, and I'm marking the students a translation project at the moment. And many students told me that through the project they will see how Chinese language actually work. And then second is they know which area they need to improve. And then they find a strategy for the next project. What should I do? What should I pay attention to? And then some students will develop their interest to become a translator.
Oh, wow, that's cool. So it's not just the language skills, language awareness, but also professional skills and cultural skills, and maybe open door for a new career.
yeah. Thank you for your you do the conclusion for me. Yes. Yeah.
And the other thing we talk about program development, right? Because in terms of being a program director, and obviously one of the things we really care about is progression. So how students progress from year 1 to year 2. So I just wondered what kind of suggestions you would be given to teachers wanted to, let's say, establish a new program. So this is about designing the progression. But I'm also interested, I think maybe for friends, for example, at Espresso, if they are just, adult learners, not necessarily in a degree program, right? How do they improve their own progression? Is there anything they can do? So I think one is more for, higher education, designing a program. The other is for individual or kind of self-study learners. How do they track their progression?
For answering your first questions, I always to see is we need the bird view. We draw ourselves out and to really look like in my talk I mentioned, to see the university infrastructure. So which department or which college you base in or which subject you base in. So that's where you got your students, and then you need to design some course to fit for their needs and their purpose. So if you do some project with a law school, then students, of course, they don't want to just learn a straight language, 你好, as a basic. They want to know some like special terms which regards to the law, and then they find they will learn something through the language, not just learn language as itself, as an object. And that then you can come back that, okay, for that purpose, what I want our student to achieve. So we often say the design backwards. It means what your learning outcome is at the end of that program. So by achieving that learning outcome, you work backwards. See, I'll go 3 years, I'll go 4 years, how I'm start design it to help student achieve that goal towards the end. So we always, say when we do something, design some program, thinking backwards is the key message I will suggest. Okay, for your answer, your second question, for amateur learners, is mean I learn as a hobby. So we will have a very famous word is 勿忘初心, do not forget where you come from and then what you're interested in. So also will be nice, you set up a goal and say what I want to do at the end. But for an adult learner, self-learn, they have different purposes. Someone learning Chinese language like a senior adult there or senior citizen or learners, they doing that is to prevent dementias. For that purpose, very simple. For that purpose, keep my retirement life busy and brain function. They have that purpose. And the other, yes, they already work. They do some work, maybe related to some areas with Chinese customer, and that's what they want to develop. So we really need to see what those learners are, and then for themselves, you can set up the goal. It means I learn as a hobby, then I don't need to really learn Chinese as being fluent speakers. I just keep my brain function, okay, keep it busy. For the other ones, say, okay, I work in the shop, I may meet some Chinese customer, but for basic greeting, can I do a simple conversation with them? All right, so it's all up to them what the goal is, yeah.
So you need to, depends on different goal. You could have different expectations, then you can work towards it.
I really like your channel. You make fantastic use character to explain the culture. And I think that some people maybe like adult learner, they are really interested in that. I mean, from the character, it's not just about character. You start talking about the culture. You start talking about history to give you a broad picture through the language, broad picture of China. And I think someone will find it's very useful to help in learning that way. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, one of the challenge why I started is because, you know, our classroom time is very limited. So sometimes it's not possible to inclusive of everything, but thank you for your kind feedback, really appreciate. And the other thing you mentioned, there's a couple of words I picked I found really interesting. So one is when you talk about using game to motivate learners. The other, of course, is about technology. And then the final thing is pandemic. So I'm very fascinated by the idea. I know because of time, we're not going to go into details, but thinking about the future, you talked a little bit about the way we're going to teach going to be different, right? Hybrid, blended. What about the learners? Do they need to improve their technological skills? Are they going to learn differently because of this new norm? Any thoughts on that?
So funny enough, during the pandemic, we need to update our language courses, and then we put a very important skill into our learning outcome is digital literacy.
I see.
Yes, so you're not just learning language. It means I give you opportunity to use different software to help you learning language. For example, I use Padlet. Okay, and sometimes I even use TikTok. I use YouTube. So those channels students see every day, and maybe they're just watching like TV dramas or have people doing silly things on the TikTok. But if they start changing the way of their thinking, that yes, I may find some very useful clip from TikTok to teach me how to speak Chinese or how to write Chinese. Maybe I follow it. I can learn 60 seconds to learn something. You'll find it very easy to absorb for those knowledge. Same as YouTube. You can use YouTube to watching some Chinese TV dramas in order to improve the listening skill. And even reading skill. I have a student, he's very funny, and he come back said to me, said, Duo, I'm watching the TV drama on YouTube. So when I turn the subtitle on, it improved my reading skill. So I turn the subtitle off, improve my listening skill.
Very clever student,
Yeah.
very good.
So suddenly students become very flexible. They feel like those is common tools we use every day, but we can use it very differently for learning purposes. So that's it called digital literacy, and also help students understand online safety, how to expose yourself online. When you write something, did you write it appropriate? So we come back, another skill is composition skill, writing skill, how you approach, how you talk to Chinese through this online platform. So this skill, I think, is also important for language learning.
Yes. Thank you. My final question, a lot of people are waiting. If you were going to give your top 3 tips to any learners who would like to speak good Chinese, what would that be?
Top 3. Well, okay, maybe it sounds so strange. That's the word I often say to my students because I don't teach basic Chinese. My module often teach intermediate to advanced level, reading, composition, plus translation. That's particular area. But every time I meet my students nowadays, the first advice I give them often is being cheeky.
What do you mean?
So because I teaching reading, so students feel so stressed about this reading, and they said, I don't understand every characters, I don't understand that word, and I check the dictionary, I feel really upset because I have constantly checking the dictionary, and I can work out that small paragraph taken me 5 hours, 3 hours to complete. I'm so exhausted, and I find that learning Chinese so tough. And then I'll ask them, I said, do you do the same things when you're reading English? If some English word you don't know, are you going to check English dictionary? Maybe not. So same to Chinese. And learning Chinese is being cheeky. It doesn't mean you need to understand every single character or words. If you somehow to get the meaning there, you are successful and you achieve your goal. And unless you really want to know what it is, focus on being cheeky and then to play with it. If you want to say these things and you suddenly forgot how to say this word, go around, find another way to achieve that goal. Don't stop there. And I often make a joke as me, if you want to take a train from Edinburgh to London and then the train being stopped, and are you going to cry and say, oh, what should I do? Or you maybe jump off the train to find another solution to get to London. You have so many ways to get to London. Being cheeky to find the best way. And that's my first question to them. Not first question, first advice. The second is, do not forget where you come from, why you want to learn language. I think I mentioned many times. Keep that hobby going. So the reason, the first time I learned language is because I love Chinese films. Then go on watching more Chinese film, will in turn help you. So if I love Chinese music, to learn music, to help you to achieve. And one of the students, first time we met, and the student told me that I like, as my person, I like rock music. And I asked, do you know Chinese rock music? I don't know. As I introduce some rock music, Chinese rock music to you, and they found it really fascinating in 1990s rock music because closely linked Chinese history and politics in that time. And then it's another way to develop the interest to keep the Chinese language going. Okay, and then the last advice is do not be shy, to be confident. And I often tell students, oh, I've been in Britain so many years, I still speak awful English, but who cares? Who cares?
Modest.
Yeah. No, I say, if you understand me, I'm happy I achieve my goal. And then if you like the other people understand you, then drop down. So sometimes the confidence is just not about you. It's you give the confidence to people. If you feel like I'm full of confidence to say those words, and even though Chinese may not understand, they feel, wow, this guy is full of confidence to speak Chinese. His Chinese must be very good. Then if I don't understand, it's my fault. Then I need to pay attention to what he's saying. And if some students I find that they are just speaking beautiful Chinese, but they always hesitate themselves. So they always at the end raise their tone a little bit. They say, 你好吗? 我是英国人. So because they're not sure, but they speak beautiful English, but they, Chinese, but because they're not sure, so they doubt themselves. When you start doubting yourself, of course your Chinese listener will start doubting, say, I don't think I understand what you're saying. So that's probably the 3 advice I would give students. Being cheeky, do not forget where you come from, being confident.
Great, thank you so much. I love your advice, especially the first one, last one, really good perspective. Thank you so much for your time again and for sharing everything with the audience here.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope it help the learners and the teacher if they want to keep studying Chinese or keep doing research in TCFL. Okay.
I'm sure it does. So, hi everyone, thank you very much for watching, and hope you've learned a lot from today's session. And thanks to Dr. Ryan again, and see you next time. Bye.